Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I don't put you all to sleep. Shri, I'll be observing you. So my name is Vinay Vuttukuru, and I lead the agriculture portfolio for the World Bank here in Kenya. And of course, I'm going to talk about our portfolio. I've been here for 4 years, and it's been a lot of fun. And we work very closely with the AgriFin team. So a bit about what I'm going to talk about. I think I'll just talk a bit about the what of what we do, specifically the 1 million farmer platform. Samuel, I was disappointed. We have a branding, 1 million farmer platform. You said that. So we launched the 1 million farmer platform. So I'm going to talk about it and a bit about the how and what our learning so far has been. So if you look at the World Bank portfolio in Kenya, we've got 4 ongoing projects. Fairly large portfolio for the size of Kenya. The first one is called the National Agriculture Rural Inclusive Growth Project. I'm sorry for those who are part of session 1. It's a bit of a repeat, but I think you just have to put up with it. So it's a $200 million investment, 21 counties. And I'm going to talk about what we do, of course, once I go through the portfolio. And then we have the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project. That's a $250 million investment, really focusing on the Asal counties. So 17 Asal counties are part of it. And this is 24 counties. Then when the locusts hit Kenya in 2020, and of course, subsequently, we've had drought, we launched the emergency, it's called the Locust Response Program, but essentially it's a drought and a locust response program. This is really the 15 counties in the northeast and mostly the Asal counties of Kenya. It's a $78 million investment. And then just a few months back, we approved our 4th investment, which is called the National Agriculture Value Chain Development Project. This is $250 million investment. Focused on 26 counties, mostly in the Mount Kenya, Rift Valley, Western Kenya belt, and really focused on growth and commercialization. So if you look at it, NAREG is very much on the productivity front, of course, mostly in this region. KSAP is really climate resilience in the NEDI and the Asal regions. The locust response program is also largely in that region, really kind of focusing on food security. And then, of course, the national agriculture value chain is about growth and commercialization. And data and digital investments across all projects is something which we've really kind of worked on institutionalizing it. So the 1 million farmer platform was launched in April 2019, and the concept was very simple, that we have almost 1 million farmers that we were targeting way back in 2019 should be part of all our agriculture projects. So we set out a dream that in 2019 that can we really kind of work with the superb ecosystem of agtech startups which are there in Kenya and facilitate partnerships between those agtech startups and the government. And as you know, the World Bank, we work exclusively with the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, the county level and national level. So we thought, how about if we can play the honest broker and really enable partnerships with these agtech startups and the government so that the smallholders can access services in the last mile. So that's how we launched it. Into April 2019 at this very place actually, and I'm happy to share that right now we have 26 agtech players who are part of it. She is one of them seated here, and these are along 4 tracks. We call them tracks, basically 4 themes. One is productivity enhancement, the second is access to markets, third is a financial inclusion track, and the 4th is the data analytics track. So what we've done over the last 3 years is really we said, here's the platform. The World Bank is playing a facilitating role, but essentially what the government is investing is really on farmer mobilization, farmer data, equipment, any training and capacity building. And it's a clarion call to the agtech startups. Look, we are bringing down your farmer acquisition costs because you have data, your farmers on a platform, you have farmers being trained, you have farmers being mobilized. Now, can you come and deliver services? And what's in it for the AgTech startups? The government is putting in the public good there. For the AgTech startups, the challenge was, if you're a 5,000 farmer company, do you have the dream to become a 50,000 farmer company? And we'll work with you in that dream. What's it for the government? We know that if you look at the county governments, devolution happened here in 2013, but sadly extension is quite weak in Kenya. So we thought this is an innovative way for the government to ensure access to last mile delivery of services, whether it's financial inclusion services, whether it's productivity enhancement services, or access to market services. So in a way, it's a win-win, for the government, solving the last mile service delivery problem, and for the AgTech startups, partnering with government means scale. So that was how we launched it. Today, we have 27 AgTech startups working with 36 county governments, and we have reached 450,000 farmers who have accessed, digital tools. Now, how did we manage to do it? So we do a lot of matchmaking. Literally, we use the word marriage a lot in these matchmaking sessions. We bring the government players and we bring the AgTech startups to one room. And I must say there's a lot of mistrust initially because AgTech, government perceives the private sector as exploitative, as they charge more than what they should. And the private sector really has a bias towards government. They're very slow. They take their own sweet time and all that. So our job as the bank was to bring them both on one table and just try and kind of deliver value on the table. Say that, no, yes, there are problems on both sides, but there are positives on both sides. Can you come together and really work? And from the bank side, through KSAP and NARIG, we had the financing to put on the table, financing towards mobilization, training, equipment, and stuff like that. So we did a lot of these matchmaking sessions, about 5 or 6 of them. All of these matchmaking sessions would result in MOUs between the county governments and the AgTech startups. And these MOUs, mind you, are not financial MOUs. Because our experience is if you get into financial MOUs, the mindset of the government is, oh, this is a contractor and I am a contractee. So that relationship is not an equal relationship. Therefore, we chose to say it's a non-financial MOU, where we clearly define what's the role that the government will play, what is the role with the AgTech startup will play. So it's a very equal relationship, and we've seen a lot of startups which have indeed kind of grown, and I'm hoping that Sri will talk about it. We have DigiCow, which was really a 5,000 farmer company, which is now a 30,000 farmer company. We have Amtech, who's grown. We have Mshamba. I can give you plenty of examples of AgTech startups who've benefited by working with the government. Also, I think we've been able to do, because we have all these analog investments on the ground through the projects which we've done. What are these analog investments? We have 1.2 million farmers which we mobilize across all the 45 rural counties into 50,000 farmer groups, which are then federated into 500 farmer cooperatives, and in each ward we have what is called a community-driven development committee, which we're transforming to SACCOs. So again, from a community institution's perspective, for the AgTech startups, it's much easier to reach out to a farmer cooperative which has a network of nearly 50 or 60 farmer groups. So again, we are saying that you have all these community institutional platforms which will help you reach out to farmers. All of these 1.2 million farmers are on a digital database. They are geo-referenced. Their mobile numbers are there. So this is all the public good investment which the government is making. In addition, for the AgTech startups, Calro has developed 900 climate-smart technologies. This is all public good which they can access. It's basically across 19 value chains, practices which enhance productivity, resilience, profitability. Each of these farmer groups have what is called a lead farmer. Now, this is one thing which I think we've learned on the way, that digital solutions on platform at the last mile also need a human touch point. I think a human touch point is very, very critical, and that's why Sri and Kuza play a big role for us, because we feel that, especially when you're talking of the marginalized areas, having a last mile human touch point who is really an interface between the technology solution and the smallholder, could do wonders. And that's why we have these 25,000 lead farmers. These lead farmers are like the entry point for Sri to develop agripreneurs. And that is what, and we have nearly 200 agripreneurs. Our vision is to go to nearly 3,000 agripreneurs. One of the things that the bank has played and which has resulted in this platform reaching out to nearly 450,000 farmers is the kind of technical assistance that we've kind of provided at the national level, at the county level, at the also with the AgTech cohort. I think I really want to recognize my team member, Beryl. You can wave your hand. So she's been there 24/7. She's working with AgTech startups. She's working with county government. She's working with the National Ministry of Agriculture, talking to them, really solving day-to-day problems. Rose is here from the AgriFin side. AgriFin, that's why we've really kind of understood that perhaps AgriFin knows the DNA of the AgTech ecosystem well, and we know the DNA of the government well. So that's how we made this marriage happen. I always joke that in the Hindu kind of wedding, what happens is when you have a marriage, there are two priests. There's a priest for the bride, there's a priest for the bridegroom. So the priest for, depending upon who you want to say, the bride is Rose, and the priest for the bridegroom is Beryl. And that's how we made this successful marriage happen. I think one of the things that we've played is also to get the buy-in from the CS agriculture, from the PS agriculture, from the governors. I personally would have spoken to at least 30, 35 governors, help them understand why rolling out the red carpet for the AgTech startups makes such a big difference, and it's in their favor to roll out this red carpet to the AgTech startups. So that's the role which we play. And yeah, I'm ending with this. So apart from AgriFin, of course, we've been partnering with Dalberg on the analytics. The Rabobank Foundation has been funding some of the AgTech startups. Microsoft has been doing the training and capacity building, and Grey Matters Capital has also been co-funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vinay, for taking us through that very interesting and comprehensive work that World Bank has been doing with the DAT. So next we are going to have Shri taking us through developing effective partnership for platforms and talking about how Kuza Biashara has been effective in developing their partnerships with other cohort members. So thank you and welcome, Shri.
Thank you. You just have to confirm you are the priest from which side? Okay. I promise, Vinay, you didn't allow me to sleep. That was a really engaging conversation, and thank you so much. From where you left, I would actually want to talk you through as to, as an AgTech innovator, and as somebody who always believed in ecosystems, we've actually realized that, yes, you can have a lot of digital technologies, but if you don't really have the last mile human user interface, we are not going to land correctly. And this is where we have actually spent the last decade plus trying to figure out how to do this. So who is Kuza? Kuza in Swahili means grow, and Biashara is business. As Kuza Biashara, we are creating opportunities for young men, women, and small business owners to learn, connect, and grow. And scale is built into anything and everything we do. Like just following what you said, Vinay, when we started off with the DAT, we were in 3 counties. We are, as of last week, in 42 counties in Kenya. And thanks to the acceleration support that we received from the World Bank, thanks to the acceleration support we received from AgriFin, and very many. As they say, it takes a village to, and it takes an ecosystem too. Yeah? And we are a certified benefit corporation, and that means we are conscious, we are responsible, and we won the best for the world recognition 3 times in a row, and this is a deliberate design. Now, when we looked at the landscape, this is how we saw the mama farmer. To just give a perspective to some of you who may be new to Kenyan context, an average Kenyan farmer is 63-year-old, and an average Kenyan is 19-year-old. And there's a massive And I don't want to go deeper there, right? So the first thing is KYC, know your customer. Honestly, having worked with telcos, having worked with banks, having worked with governments, nobody knows this farmer. And then extension services, Vinay, you did touch upon that. Last we gathered is an average in Kenya from public sector extension worker to farmer ratio is 1 to 5,000. I'm saying average. In some of those arid and semi-arid, it is beyond 10,000. The recommended ratio is 1 to 200 or 1 to 400. So that's where the huge gap is. And we expect this mama farmer, who is probably not even went to high school, has to get all of this right to be able to put an extra dollar in her wallet. So we started at the point where we said, can we start at the grassroots level and take a bottom-up approach? My entire leadership team, we've been in the digital space for 25 years, but we decided to change our boots, started wearing muddy boots. I have a decent boots today. But we said, let's go to the grassroots level and do whatever innovation we want to do at a grassroots level. And this is a bottom-up model where we realize that if we are able to look at, and by the way, there are 3 challenges I wanted to highlight. One is a farmer challenge. The second is a challenge of youth. And we all know the unemployment rates and how youth are migrating to bigger cities. And the third dimension is about the service providers. Service providers, call it a large traditional companies, call it digital companies, all of them have the challenge of reaching the last mile to the farmer. Even they don't know their customers. So we looked at it and then said, these extreme conditions, and now COVID, and the climate, and all of this, we said, these extreme conditions are a fertile soil for extreme innovation. And this is where we started looking at reshaping some of this youth as agripreneurs, that is agriculture entrepreneurs, put them through. They are not ready, by the way. They are not ready-made. They don't know university is producing them. And by the way, the qualifying criteria is you have to be, preference would be given to the high school dropouts. That's how we actually go and advertise. And that's how we get a lot of hustlers, a lot of people who are enterprising, and we have a process by which we do a lot of this to select them. And they offer bundled services. This is the design modeling, and I'll tell you how we have failed many times and how we have succeeded few times. So they offer bundled services of crop advisory, and by the way, they are not agronomists. How can a non-agronomist youth, unemployed, rural youth, high school dropout can deliver crop advisory? And we have challenged the status quo and found a solution. And then they are offering now access to inputs, credit, and markets. That's where the modeling is. So they are not ready. So that's the birth of a product called Ready. We call it Rural Entrepreneur Development Incubators. These are incubators, these are accelerators at a grassroots level. They are not happening in those big hotels and big fancy places. They are happening out there in the bush. And this is where we are humanizing the digital technologies and making them happen at that level. So they go through 3 phases: learn, connect, and grow. That's the philosophy of Kuza. You learn with a mentor. We are actually deploying mentors. Thanks to AgriFin for supporting us. Sam, call out for you. Thank you so much for believing. And just because you supported us, we managed to scale from 14 to 30, 27 counties within the DAT program. So they learn with a mentor, they connect with a set of farmers, connect with a set of service providers, and then they grow. Initially, we thought it's a linear path, but then we realized it's a cyclical path. Now, how do they do it? So we realized that the attention span of people is going down. What used to be like 15 minutes a few years ago has come down to 3 minutes. And post-COVID, it's actually at about 2 minutes, going to 15 seconds. Everyone has become time poor, the rich and the poor. Right? So we actually created this category about 10 years ago called micro-learning. We started creating bite-sized, I lovingly call it snackable content, which is available in your back pocket, that you should be able to access on demand in the context of your own situation in a language that you understand. Thank you. Yesterday, we spent a day brainstorming with the Gates Foundation on some of these things, and this is what we have experimented rapidly. And by the way, we ended up creating over 10,000 plus micro-learning videos in 10 languages. So what? So what's the big deal? We have actually humanized a lot of these agronomy practices in a simple language that a farmer can understand. That's one side of it. The second is micro-distribution. We realize that there are so many balloons that are born, a lot of internet initiatives are happening, but the bottom billion are not able to connect. So we actually said we have a choice. Either we wait till the cows come home when the internet is available at a grassroots level, or do something. Maybe, Johan, can I request you to just passed me the backpack. We came out with a very frugal solution, a very practical solution, which actually works at a grassroots level. We are equipping our youth entrepreneurs with, thank you, John, backpacks like this. They are very ugly. They're deliberately designed that way. It guarantees 3 kilometers. If you're coming with this backpack, you can see. And then when farmers see somebody coming with all of this, oh, some goodies are coming, right? So the goodies in this case are knowledge bites. So this is a small, micro, self. Number two, we also came out with something which is a device like this. Yeah. So this is a edge computing device. That is, the entire digital content and platform is sitting inside this. When I power it on, it actually creates a hotspot in this range. And up to 40 people with a smartphone can connect to this. So we don't need to necessarily go to the internet to access this. It's available. This is what now we are plugging into the communities so they're able to access this. And then you may ask me, so a lot of these farmers don't have smartphones. What do we do? I said, okay, we can also carry some 16 devices in this. We lend this to people so that they can start. So this is an activation process. And this is a process in which we actually start engaging them. And this is where all the content that we put together is packaged like this, branded, so that it's high definition video content, so we are not depriving them by sending text messages. This is in livestock, this is crops, all of this. And now this is how they're able to go out there and then do this in a language and even dialect. So these are some of the real experiences of how our entrepreneurs are on a daily basis engaging a set of 200 farmers each, and they engage them in groups of 20. And that's how they earn the trust. By doing this 3-4 times, they earn the trust. And that's when they are able to now capture the demand. And by the way, the youth agripreneurs have to necessarily be from within the local communities to be able to be selected for this. So fast tracking. And by the way, we've actually created an omni-channel strategy here, where if you don't have any access, you can go with this entrepreneur-led model. If you have access to devices, WhatsApp or any of them, you can access them. Or if you other platforms, other partners, we are able to integrate. So that way, we are not leaving anyone behind. So to summarize, one is we are getting them ready so that they go through the incubation process. And second, we've created something called a One Network. Now, here is the platform play coming in. When these youth agripreneurs are engaging farmers and educating them on something like science of soil health, the immediate thing is about 20% of them say, I want to try it. That's how the demand gets generated for, say, soil testing or for inputs or anything like that. So this is where we are actually now bringing in a set of ecosystem partners and service providers so that each of them don't have to necessarily go all the way to reach the farmers. They can plug their services in here. And now we are using the last mile youth entrepreneurs as the service providers. And that's where the accountability comes, transparency comes, and the relationship is leveraged. And I need to admit it is not easy. Everybody wants to do their own thing. But we have failed miserably. But now, because we have over 5,000 entrepreneurs now across 5 countries between Africa and Asia, we have expanded rapidly and close to about 700,000 farmers. Now the conversations are starting. Now people are understanding. And the plug and play is happening. And I'm sure it's a matter of time. So here, we could not have achieved this by doing it alone. And I really want to thank the World Bank, the NARIG, and the KSAP programs. Signing up with 27 county governments is not easy. And Vinay, thank you so much for honestly saying that it is not easy. But there is nothing like government scale. When they get it, they sprint. Like right now, I'm sitting here, I received 16 calls from 4 different counties saying they want to add more. So now they're all running and they want to really do this. And you can see the ecosystem here. It's a combination of UN organizations, combination of private sector companies, multinationals, and also the governments. Now this is where we have realized that, and by the way, this is our network in Kenya. It's a pretty diagram, right? But this is a data diagram which shows that each of those orange purple dot there is an entrepreneur. Each of the purple one there is a service provider. And the green ones are the counties where it's happening. And the size shows the amount of transactions that they're doing. By the way, last 18 months, this network has done about $25 million of transactions. And it's just a beginning. To summarize, this is how we learned, and this is where Sam wanted me to speak about the partnerships. And this is how we are seeing this. So there's a public sector investment. We're calling this as a 4P ecosystem model. That is public sector, philanthropy sector, private sector, and a platform model. The public sector is putting the public good investment, like the DAT, like the 1 million farmer platform, because of which the philanthropy sector is supporting, like the way AgriFin supported us in doing few things. And this is where the cost of acquisition of the farmers is going down. So then the private sectors are jumping in because they see that, oh, by the way, if I work with you, I have access to 500,000 farmers, 200,000 farmers. And that's the service delivery model that is sustaining. And all of this value we are capturing in the platform. And this is a testimony of how things are happening. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Sri. I think there's a very key component that Sri has mentioned. And randomly, I'm coming round again. So these three things, would you know what one is? Kuza philosophy. Make a wild guess.
Partnerships.
Partnerships, yes. Through Connect. There's another one, yes.
Don't start exposing us, Rose.
I thought I'm the only one who sleeps in it.
Kuza philosophies, there are three key things. Yes. Clap for him, clap for the two of them. I can see we've been very attentive. And then there's one more thing. Let me come to you, Calvins. Correct. An applause for Calvins. So, Sri, good job on what you've done with these farmers. And I think you're doing an amazing job connecting people, making them learn, making them grow in that effort, and also giving them jobs. And I think with that, Kuza has recorded estimatedly 150,000 creation for employment. And I think that is very remarkable. He's making a huge difference through his platforms, through his model, and also through technology. And with that, we also want to give an opportunity to Renee Hunter to give us a presentation on her approach on making platforms work for women in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you so much, Rose. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be presenting this to you. It's a very first look at some insights that we should hopefully publish before Christmas, because that's when we need to finish everything for this year. This is the very first time that we're talking about this in a public setting, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to land for you. Essentially, what we want to ask with this presentation is, we've spent quite some time talking about all the amazing benefits and the synergies that can be unlocked and the livelihoods that can be expanded exponentially through digital platforms for agriculture. The one big question that we want to keep asking as Value for Women, and as a lot of you in this audience, I see Renee, coincidentally also Renee nodding here, is how do we make sure that this is the case for everyone? How do we make sure that this also works for women? So we've got some initial thoughts on that. Before I dive in, I do just want to note, Rose said this is my approach for making sure that platforms work for women. It's not, it's our approach. This was a team effort. So I work for an organization called Value for Women. We are a global gender inclusion consulting firm, which means that we work with a variety of stakeholders, from investors, development banks, foundations, but also businesses directly, to apply a gender lens to what they do. And this can be at a strategic level or at a very practical business strategy level. So here's a list of some of my colleagues that were involved. Then we also collaborated with ISF advisors, and Matt is there in the background as well. ISF advisors focus on finance for food production and food systems and rural economies, and they do a combination of research, strategic advisory, and finance advisory. I hope I presented you properly, Matt. And then we did this work in contract with CGAP. So CGAP needs no introduction. Jamie Anderson and her team have been great thought partners in this. So why platforms for women? Well, because as I think we all are aware, women play a central role in rural economies, but they are hindered by various barriers. On the slide you see but a few. Lack of access to resources, social norms. This is a big one that actually underlies all of these other barriers. Restricting activities, movements, relationships. Time poverty, because there are so many demands on your time, so many responsibilities. Lack of access to finance. And we see that digital platforms can actually help overcome some of these barriers, right? So by disintermediating markets, you can overcome some of these social barriers that might hinder women from accessing markets. You can decrease the barriers to financing, facilitate access to information, etc., etc. So essentially all of these benefits that we've seen just now definitely exist for women. However, we see that platforms still struggle to reach women meaningfully. So as of 2021, ISF actually mapped out 75 agricultural specific platform models. For all of them, as I'm sure you're very aware, scaling is a massive concern. But women are not being sufficiently reached. So we know that women are, up to half of smallholder farmers, but they only make up 25% of AgTech users. And of those that are being reached, their usage rates are lagging. So on the one hand, you're not reaching them, and on the other hand, you're not meaningfully serving them. So what can we do to improve that? Gender-forward business practices might provide an answer. So I'm just going to introduce this to you first before I go into some of our findings. At Value for Women, when we talk about gender-forward business practices, what we mean are the kinds of practices undertaken by businesses that intentionally work to address gender inequalities. And they can do this by focusing on a number of different areas. So there's not one way to be gender inclusive. So you can either focus on women-led businesses, so literally your women farmers that are running their agribusinesses, women in the workforce, so literally who works for you, who are you employing as an AgTech or as a platform, women customers, who makes use of your services, and then also women in the value chain or in the platform sector as people that earn an income through the platform, either as agents or as literally vendors in, say, e-commerce platforms. So you can choose your input, and there's different ways in which you can address these. So what might this look like for digital platforms? Well, in the research that we did, we identified 6 areas for best practices. This is based on work that we did on digital platforms, but also on all of the other work that Value for Women has done on our general gender assessment frameworks. So there's 2 foundational areas. You want to, one, look at what is your strategic orientation. So literally, do you have a consideration for gender inclusion in your strategy from the outset? And also your organizational makeup. It does actually make a difference for you as an organization to have women in leadership, to have sufficient women in your product design team, in your marketing team, etc. And to be able to make sure that you can actually hire those women, you need to have the policies to back that up. So what are your workplace policies? And then from that, we've got 4 areas that focus more outward. And with that, for all of them, essentially it starts with your sexist aggregated data. We know that digital platforms should have a lot of that, yet, spoiler alert, we see that many of them don't actually use it to the extent that they could. So start with collecting and analyzing your sexist aggregated data, and then respond to those findings, either in product and service design, marketing acquisition, customer targeting, and involving women in the business model. And don't worry, I'll give you some examples for each of these. So what we then did in our research is we worked with a couple of platforms. So here I'm aggregating some findings both on 8 platforms that we engaged with for this upcoming report, as well as 7 platforms that we engaged in a previous project this year. And here are some things that we found. So firstly, digital platforms are at the start of their gender journey, which might sound disheartening? I don't think it is, because it just means that there's a lot that we can achieve. So for us, this is actually quite exciting. What this slide shows you is for each of these different sort of best practice areas, we give a rough indication of, having assessed the business models of the platforms that we spoke with, roughly where do they sit? Like how extensive is the extent to which they consider gender differences, and to what extent do they respond to those in these different business areas? So what we see first is that your two foundational ones are a bit more extensive than your other ones. What this tells us is that, exactly as I said, they're at the start of their journey. So there is a level of commitment, right? So most platforms that we speak to, especially in the agri space, are very aware that women are absolutely fundamental. It's important that we bring them along. We are trying to crack this nut. Similarly on your internal strategies, but this is not actually reflected in any of the practical strategies that come after that. So what we've identified then is a few steps to move ahead, and I'm going to give you these for both the digital platforms themselves. Ooh, I'm on the edge here. The digital platforms themselves, as well as the other players in the ecosystem, because we know that a lot of you are actually foundations, research organizations, investors. So we also want to give you some indication, how can you help move the needle along? So the first one is embed gender considerations in organizational strategy. Then from there, as I said, this really doesn't sound very sexy, unfortunately, but it is continuously surprising to me how few organizations actually make use of their data assets, and the extent to which organizations often will say, oh yeah, we've got all of this data on our customers and our users. Yeah, we've never looked at it in a sexist aggregated way. We just never thought to do so. It never came up for us. So I'm telling you now, let this be your reminder. Please do it. And then from there, you're able to innovate on your offerings for women, and you can from there focus on increasing income generating opportunities for women. So I can imagine that at this point, probably you're wondering, okay, this is all very theoretical and this is a great framework, but what does this look like in practice? So some examples. We spoke to, among others, these 4 platforms. And at the end of this presentation, there is a QR code that you can scan so that you can receive the report when it comes out. It includes case studies on all of these. But some examples of what we're seeing. So firstly, embedding gender considerations in your strategy. So Afex, and I believe they're in the room here somewhere, as they are focusing on scaling, are realizing that the scale that they want to reach will actually not be possible without meaningfully including women users. So they're actually realizing that they need to take a step back and make sure that, how do we keep this gender inclusion objective front and center as we move forward? COPE.ADAPT is an interesting one, which focuses on their data assets. So COPE.ADAPT actually, this point that I just mentioned about gender considerations in your strategy, they've done this from the very beginning. It's always been very important to them. And what they're now realizing is they've been able to collect their data from the very beginning, and they've got it on their users, the people that earn income through them, and they're able to use that data now to actually inform on a month-to-month basis what is our next step going to be. Then focusing on your users a bit more specifically, we've got innovating on offerings for women. So Samunati in India is actually an interesting example. So they are using, a grant fund to focus on 10,000 women users that they're now onboarding. And this means, because they're very aware that they can't just offer their normal services, they need to actually bring a very dedicated approach on board. Excuse me, sorry, I've got something in my throat. Sorry about that. So they're realizing that to be able to actually achieve these 10,000 women, they need to change their approach. So they're very deliberately looking at, what is our marketing? What is actually the service that we're explaining to women? How can that work? Who is going into the field to onboard them? These need to be women. Then from there on, finally, Copia, another interesting example here in Kenya. They are working with a lot of agents. So again, we go back to that last mile distribution question. What Copia realized is that a lot of their agents are women. That works really well for them. But to be able to, Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, that helps. To be able to actually help these women agents run their business and meaningfully onboard the customers that they need to, they're focusing on digitizing their processes. However, they realize that there is a bit of a gender gap, and that many of their women customers don't actually have access to phones. So they are now experimenting with a pay-go model to be able to onboard more of their women agents onto this digital system. So these are just a few examples.
Really looking at how content creators and social media users in the drylands across Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Nigeria all find ways to overcome this megabyte hurdle and create content in the drylands, in the ASALs and areas like that. And there's some wonderful blogs of which Alexis here was actually writing and penning, helping our research jump out of many, many slides and dense documents into some wonderfully approachable insights. But this age of the megabyte hopefully comes up in our panel. And with that, I'd like to invite Alexis Tay to the stage. She's a researcher with Spark, which is supporting pastoralism and agriculture in recurrent crisis and conflict, Spark, and a publisher and librarian with Downriver Road. So, welcome to the panel, and we have a master chef here, all right? We have a sleepy, snoozy, great presenter here. And lastly, we have a Zumba expert in the room and fun-loving dance. So, Alexis, the floor is yours. I think you have some panelists to introduce. And thank you, everybody.
Largely, we say, and I'll go back to the title as an anchor, and I say this so that you can help me remember that I'm holding myself to this, which is making platforms work for smallholder farmers. So number one, making platforms, which I'm going to rely on you to help us. How do we make those platforms? And I think the implicit here in parentheses is digital platforms, but challenge me on that. And then work for smallholder farmers. So it's not just that they're there, we want them to be effective, efficient, impactful. And then smallholder farmers being the purpose and why we're here today. And so I'd love you to help me think about when we say smallholder farmers, we agreed with Sam that we want this to be much more expansive. Anyone who is considered marginalized, pastoralists, so that's our big soapbox for, with Spark here. And you are helping us think through the gender gap as far as data, as far as device ownership, and so on and so on. So I'd love you to help me step back and say, in your wonderful insights and well presented, what's your sense of what are the key ideas for inclusive technology or humanizing technology, I love that, that applies not just for women, but broadly if you're interested in making platforms that are inclusive? That's my question, big one, so feel free.
No, I love that question because a lot of the work that we do, we apply that to gender divides, gender gaps, but a lot of it can be applied to any kind of inclusive work that you're trying to do. Anybody that is not a sort of middle-aged man, often white man, but anybody outside of that norm that you're trying to include, you need to sort of apply a similar type of lens and go through a similar type of exercise, right? So this sometimes feels a little bit like a cop-out as an answer because I don't have a fantastic toolbox that I can give you and say, this will work every single time. It really starts with being very intentional at the beginning. You're not going to, the norm is the norm, and that's what everything sort of works for at the moment. That is why it's called the norm. So you're not going to include pastoralists or women smallholder farmers or people that are less digitally literate by accident. That's not going to happen. So you need to be very, very explicit about who do we want to make sure actually uses our products and services and what value do we want to get out of that. How are we going to, what does success look like and how will we know that they are getting value out of that, and are you going to actually go and measure that? And to also, and this is hard because we're, as everybody has said, incredibly time poor and we like to just keep going and keep with the momentum. So it's difficult, but from time to time also hold yourself accountable. And that's where that sexist aggregated data or any kind of disaggregated data comes into. Regularly ask yourself, who am I not reaching? So this is what I set out to do. Are there any gaps here that I'm seeing? And then from there, you can go into your very practical strategies and innovations and your tech and touch and bringing women agents into the field, whatever. But it starts with that intentionality and really asking yourself, who am I reaching and who not?
I love that. And I've been learning this Hebrew word. I'm going to say it badly, but kavanah. And I like that because we hear about deliberate practice. So I love that you brought us back to intentionality. I think the tools will change per context. So if you whipped out a toolbox, I would be very impressed and shocked. And so I think this intentionality as a guiding signpost, or really like accompanying you on the journey that it really is. So I love that. And maybe going back to intentionality, tell us about making people happy through technology. How do you do this? And I think the key question here we are keen to hear from you is like affordability. When it's pinching our pockets, we feel it really keenly, hard to smile. So I'd love to hear you bring us back to affordability and kind of inclusive tech as well.
Yeah. So maybe just to put it into context from the COPE.ADAPT side, COPE.ADAPT's key ethos was, we noticed that there was a deficit. When you go to the rural areas, you tend to always find the rural people have to travel long distances just to get anything. Whether it is to do their farming, it is to buy groceries, just to buy a packet of medicine, they have to travel long distances. And that was where the gap was identified. And over the years, it's now 9 years, we've created an organization that has an agent network, which allows a farmer to be at least within a kilometer to 3 kilometers of walking distance from the nearest COPE.ADAPT agent. So we've got an agent network now of about 40,000 agents across Kenya and Uganda. And that network has allowed access to products of all nature, from foodstuff, farming equipment, transportation equipment, whatever it is that can be supplied from a grocery perspective, and now also inclusive of services. We're able to get those products and services accessible to the customer. Now, from that perspective, what we have now is a person who was sitting at home and having to travel and pay 200 shillings to go and buy whatever it was that they had to go and buy. Now they simply sit at home with our network of 40,000 agents now, spread across the 2 countries. They're able to just simply make a call or simply walk to the nearest agent. And the net agents themselves have now been digitized, or at least we're working in the process of digitizing. As Thierry was just talking about, we're in the process now of digitizing those agents. And the interesting thing is, as we did that, the agents themselves became community leaders. And 77% of them are women. And so of those 77%, those women are now community leaders. They're actually influencing the community. They actually, we've got houses that are being built with full roof, tiles, everything, and it's all supplied by COPE.ADAPT, and it's just someone who came, said, I want this, and within 48 hours they had a delivery done to them. And that I think makes life easier, and that's the principle of where we want to go across Africa.
Absolutely. And yeah, wonderful. I will not interject, except to say, I think, or add, I'm always conscious about, if we don't have a map, we're relying on a compass, and that compass is intentionality and goodwill and good faith. I think it also matters who is in the room, right? So for example, there are only 2 steps to go up here, but I cannot go up the 2 steps. And if the people who are organizing this event are not disabled, obviously they wouldn't know that. So I'm always curious to hear how, particularly in logistics, where I think mobility, affordability, inclusion starts to matter. How can we be very thoughtful, intentional, to keep using this word when it comes to thinking about that affordability, access, and so on? So I'd invite you, Thibault, to go next.
Thank you. I think as a former consultant, there are 4 things I'd like to cover. One, I think affordability starts by market fit. And market fit goes with the vehicles, making sure that we design and select the vehicles that meet the demand of the roads, but it's not necessarily going for the cheapest vehicle, but the vehicle with the lowest cost over the lifetime. And and sometimes it also means investing a bit more in the beginning. It also works, a market fit also goes for technology. Platforms, when we deal with farmers, I think you see only 15% of them have a smartphone, and within this 15%, I would say only 10% can actually afford data on a daily basis. So the second point on that is we are using USSD to make our platform readily available to all the farmers. And we've developed actually a ride-sharing platform based on USSD, which was not simple. Then the second point is using digital solutions to optimize the utilization of the assets. The assets cannot be owned by one person. It doesn't work in rural areas, so it needs to be shared. And shared means shared mobility, and shared mobility means what I was just referring to, ride sharing, or group ownership. And this needs to be supported again by technology, GPS tracking, PayGo, etc. The third point was, I think, again, around using digital solutions to lower the credit risk for financial institutions. So using the data that you collect, like we know from the farmers that we collect data, dairy milk every day. We know how many liters they've been delivering to us for the last 24 months. And then we can tell, that they can afford $1 a day based on that. And the fourth point was, yes, thank you. Again, when it comes to utilizing these assets, it's not only about shared mobility, but also using the asset. A vehicle needs to be full on the way out, the first mile from the farm to the market. But to make it, to utilize it, it needs to be full on the way back. And I was having a conversation just before with COPE.ADAPT on that. So yeah, that would be it.
Excellent, thank you. And I love a pithy 1, 2, 3, 4. So I support that. So maybe Vinay, we can go to you next. The question I have is, we're talking about inclusion, so a diverse set of people involved in the room, in the space for design, but also for impact. Then I'd love to talk about a volumes game. I like the idea of 1 million farmer platform. So talk to me about how we're thinking about rural and broadly marginalized areas, so that includes not just agrarian, but also pastoralist areas, for example. But how do you increase the scale? More farmers, a million plus. Tell me.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think, let me touch upon the inclusion question first, and then I'll also come to the scale question. I think on the inclusion question, and this is our learning of working for the last 4 years, and inclusion is a lot. How do you ensure inclusion of women? How do you ensure inclusion of a half an acre farmer, not just the 10 acres, 20 acres? How do you ensure that a farmer in Mandera is included, not just a farmer in Nyeri? I'm not taking sides, but just trying to contrast here, right? So I think the key is the following. One, I think if you really want to ensure inclusion, you need to be flexible, adaptable, and have a more customized approach to service delivery. And you cannot have a standardized, the same formula you have to cater a 10-acre farmer, you can't use for a half an acre farmer. The same formula that you have to cater a farmer, you can't cater, use the same solution for a pastoralist. That's number one. Adaptability, flexibility, and customization. The second is bundling. Now, why is bundling important? Well, I think when it comes to a 10-acre farmer, if you're able to solve the access to finance problem, perhaps you're helping the farmer really kind of change the trajectory. But if you're talking of a pastoralist in Kajiado, right? Mm-hmm. You should be able to have multiple pathways to touch that farmer's livelihood, finance is one, but you should also be able to provide vaccination services for the pastoralists. You should also have insurance. You should also look at how do you solve the access to market problem. And I don't think in terms of last mile service delivery, we have we can afford to have different players delivering this solution. Therefore, if you're talking of inclusion, bundling is very, very important. Multiple touch points in terms of being able to make a difference to the lives of the most marginalized is very, very important. And that comes to the last point, which is, again, my solution, my learning is, that's why we were very keen to bring a player like Kuza on board, is the human touch point. Where you don't have, somebody who can use a smartphone, we can still make the digital solution touch that farmer. If you have an agripreneur as an interface between our solution and the farmer. So the human touch point also becomes very, very important. I think on the scale question, all which I've said are important for the scale. Even for scale, bundling is important, because I think for government, instead of having a number of transaction points to reach number of AgTech service players, if you can have bundling and if you have one platform through which you can reach out to multiple players, scale becomes easier. So bundling also contributes to scale. But I think scale, my sense is somehow I have a kind of bias towards finance being a big constraint. Finance, not just for the farmer, but also the AgTech players, right? For them to really kind of grow into 100,000 farmer companies, 200,000 farmer companies, they need affordable access to credit. So scale, that's another binding constraint we'll have to kind of solve. How do we solve the access to credit for both the service provider and the farmer? I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I think we're kind of back to your toolbox, Renee, because it sounds like a bundle essentially is you want to provide and fill a toolbox with as many things as possible for both service providers and the farmer. And this farmer we can swap for a pastoralist, for whatever is a key beneficiary, participant, customer, and so on. And so maybe I want to start with you, Georgia, and then come back to you with this question, because I have two questions for both of you, but I'd be curious what questions you have for each other. Because, so Learn Inc., you told me a little bit about it at the marketplace, so share a little bit about that, but critically, your positioning as I'm assuming a private company, and how you fit into such a bundle, for example, if you were to be curated by the World Bank as a curator, in this case, the bundler.
We've created this amazing content. How can we get it out to people? So what we want to do is be that kind of link between the content creators, the people who are experts and in creating really great stuff, and the people who have those established networks and who we can really seamlessly deliver that training through. And that's actually a project we were doing with Mercy Corps this year to launch what is now our kind of content library. So anyone can create training content, and that training content can now be integrated into the training of private sector organizations across Africa, across the world. So I think that answers your question. I think the missing piece here, from my perspective anyway, are these kind of integration plays. So we don't want to be people who are delivering direct to the users. We want to be that integration piece that brings together the various different things that people are doing now and make that whole process work in a much more kind of scalable, streamlined way.
Excellent. Yes, I'm just thinking of all the curricula, the little TV/WhatsApp content we made, and then they just hang, That's the danger of having a program that's tied to 2 years.
Well, exactly, right? And this is why we should talk, right? Because all of that content, we can get that in our content library, and we could get that out to tens of thousands of people next week, right? If you wanted to, because that's the missing piece. So I think that's my perspective anyway.
Excellent. And I think I love that you phrase it like the role that you're keen to play is this integration piece. So I'd be curious to hear in your words, what is Kuza Biashara's role? What is your role now? Is it where you want to be? How do you see that changing? In the bigger bundle.
I have to wake up, right? So our purpose is very simple. We are focused on the bottom billion. The bottom billion who don't have an earning potential, who don't have a voice. We all think that's what they want. Hardly we know what they need. And I believe the marginalized people are not marginalized minds. They know what they want. It's just that one has to honestly go sit with them, have a truthful conversation, and a lot of times they are the ones who are challenging us, telling us what they need, what they want. And Kuza Biashara as a journey has been, we actually had no business plan. It started off as a project within the company. We've bootstrapped it till date. We haven't raised any external capital because when we sit with investors, they ask few questions which we feared would always take our focus away from bottom billion. It's very easy for us to fall in that trap because it's easy for us to shift our focus to the marketplace side, do transactions, get ARR, get all those returns and all of that. But fundamentally, if the purpose, as a purpose-driven, certified B corporation, we felt we are responsible and accountable to do what we need to do. And as much as we've been in the digital space for 25 years, having built technologies, by the way, the public health system of Kenya runs on our technology. That's how we learned how things don't work in the rural places. That's when the idea dawned upon us that, we got to talk to them, we got to be there. So we are very respectful to the communities, and the indigenous knowledge is actually quite a bit. Most of the time, we don't need to really take it top down. Yeah. They know it. They have been doing it. Without satellites, they have still been farming for so many years. Yeah. So there is a secret there. Yeah.
And we're trying to enter.
Exactly. Yeah. Follow the path. Follow us.
Exactly.
But I don't think we have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this is a one organization's initiative. It's a combination. It's a family. It's a set of like-minded, mission-aligned enterprises. Yeah. But we said our mission is to ensure that the last mile connectivity happens.
Okay.
By the way, why is it last mile?
You tell me.
Yeah, I'm even questioning that. Why is it last mile? Is it because I'm sitting
because you're counting
in my
from
ivory
Nairobi.
tower and then
Nairobi's
saying you're
first
there?
Mile and then
it's the first mile, right? So that's the voice. Yeah. And that's where the spending potential is.
So then I have an edit to your slide. You put the one platform in the center.
Yeah.
Remove that. Who's in the center based on your calculation of the new first mile?
Yeah.